Hey folks, I'm David.
This is Cordy.
I'm a doctor of physical therapy and a jiu-jitsu blue belt. She's a yoga teacher. And together we lead Shipibo led and operated ayahuasca retreats down in Peru. You can come with us on retreat, or you can support our nonprofit foundation that gives back to the Shipibo lineage. And you can catch us on the Jesse T Show.
Cordy, Dr. David, welcome to the Jesse T Show.
Thank you, brother. Thank you so much for having us here, man. I'm stoked.
Yeah, it's absolutely been great in connecting, and we worked through a couple of technical difficulties on my side to get to this point. So I'm very thankful that you had the graciousness to put up with it. And we are here today to talk about both of you, the impact that you're making in the world, and what it is that you'd love to see from that impact. So if you would, just give us a little bit of color and context, maybe it is who you are and kind of what you're doing today.
Right on, man. That feels it feels very grandiose the way that you just put that. And this is maybe something actually for me that I need to work through still, is like accepting that we're actually doing pretty awesome things right now, objectively. So I'm a doctor of physical therapy by training. I am a jiu-jitsu blue belt. About a year and a half ago, I quit my clinic job to start my own business, working on just coaching jiu-jitsu athletes to be healthy. My goal was always to have like flexibility in my life, to be able to travel. I had no idea what my life would actually look like, but I knew that I wanted that. So that was kind of the first step, was starting my own business. That led to me going to jiu-jitsu camp in Costa Rica, doing ayahuasca in Costa Rica, meeting this lovely lady right here. And I'm sure we'll get all into that. And fast forward to now, we live together in Mexico. We both operate remote businesses. And part of that is organizing ayahuasca retreats at a very unique center, which we'll talk all about. And after that last one, we came home and decided that we needed to do even more to support these indigenous people down there. So that led to us starting a future nonprofit. I can't technically call it a nonprofit because we're waiting for the IRS application, but it led to us forming the Plant Medicine Preservation Project, which is all about sponsoring people in need to connect them with this medicine and giving back to the Shipibo community down in Peru that leads and that serves this medicine.
It's beautiful. And before I touch a little bit further into kind of your impetus, the muse that kind of got you on this track, because we all kind of have a calling when we get on this spiritual journey. Some can be lifelong, some can be soul's journeys of 10 lifetimes, some can be, a year you've been doing it, but I want to get to yours in just a moment. But jump into Cordy, a little bit about you, a little about your story, a little bit about your what got you to today.
Oh my God. That is such a long and such a weird and windy and wonderful story. I'm originally from Austria, actually, and I had this idea of, after graduating from university, I was like, oh, let me pop over to Central America for like 2 or 3 months just to see the Mayan ruins. And about 6 weeks into the trip, I was like, I don't want to go back. Like, I don't want to go back to school. Like, there's this whole, when you're living a life, I grew up in this super, super small town where everyone's following this path where, like you go through high school, go to university, move back to your hometown, kind of halfway across from your parents, marry a high school sweetheart, and then just like work the same job for, 40 years essentially. And
Yep.
I kind of saw myself heading in that direction, and I was just terrified. And it's not necessarily that it was bad or anything. It was just this absolute suffocating internally where, there's so much more out there. You don't know what the fuck it is, but you're like, okay, like there's something more out there. And I always really loved traveling. I was always fascinated by other cultures. And I was like, I'm just not going to wait for something to come to me. But that was really the first time that I made this really hard decision to actually do what I wanted to do. So I went from having a job fully supporting myself, having a really beautiful relationship, and having, been accepted to an incredible master's program in the Netherlands, just kind of doing all of these things very successfully outwardly. I was like, I'm kind of dead inside. Like, this is not great. And so I made this decision I'm just going to choose me, and I don't know what's going to happen, but really dove off the deep end and basically just sent my family a WhatsApp and was like, I'm not coming back. Like, I'm staying in Central America or South America. And then I turned my phone off for like a week.
Wow. Good for you.
Yeah, they were.
That's great.
And
that sounds like the dream for most people, right? Like,
oh, it was amazing. Yeah. And I was in Costa Rica and going through this intense just breakdown of crying all the time, feeling like not knowing what to do and where to go, and just kind of drifting a little aimlessly.
Yep.
And how I actually got put on this path, it was so interesting. I randomly found this yoga teacher training that was like 5 months out from where I was at. And it was in Ecuador. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna try to make my way to Ecuador within the next 5 months. And so I did. And it was 5 months where it was very weird. And
what did that process look like? Not to cut you off, but like when you say you want, you set the intention, if it was kind of loose and it just kind of ethereal, like, you know, I want to get to Ecuador in 5 months, but it didn't sound initially like there was like a specific plan. Like, were you going from town to town? Were you like meeting new people? Or did you just wait, like after 5 months, you took a plane, hopped on a plane, got to Ecuador, or a car? How did that all look for you? That like specific part of the journey?
So it was actually funny because initially it only planned for like 2 or 2.5 months in Central America. So I had all my flights booked. Like, I had everything meticulously planned out. I had all of my accommodations set up, everything. And honestly, I think like three days into that trip, like I already missed my first flight because I was like, fuck this. I'm not going home from Cuba. I'm just going to stay. Like, I'll figure it out later. I think I missed, honestly, Jesse, I think I missed at least 8 flights that I'd booked because I was like, nah, fuck. I don't want to.
Were you stacking credits or were you losing money? Like, were you getting?
I was losing money. Austria doesn't have the nice, like travel rewards credit card system.
Yeah.
I was 22. So I was like, I had no idea what I was doing.
Price of entry for spiritual growth.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
And I started meeting people and basically just following them around and really feeling into what do I want to do. So most people kind of have this route where they will start maybe in Mexico and then make their way down towards Central America. And then they end up somewhere in South America. And I was just hopping around. I was going up to the US. I was going back to Mexico. I was going to Colombia. I was going back to the US. I was just going back and forth all the time and just very much winging it, honestly.
Yep.
And depending on when I met people, they were like, oh, like, I'll be in Colombia in 3 weeks. So you want to come? I was like, yeah, sure. I don't have anything else to do. And it was awesome. It was like a really cool time of my life. I was just backpacking and like in hostels all the time. Wow. So very
beautiful,
cool experience and met wonderful people, but there was no really deeper meaning behind it. Mm-hmm. A lot of it was, I don't know what else to do. And I was seeking all of these experiences that gave me a thrill in the moment. And then I was still kind of left with, I still don't know what I want to do or who I am.
Yeah.
And
that's hard.
Yeah. And there's like this thing of, even though you're constantly surrounded by people, you feel kind of lonely because you're not with yourself. And at that time, I was terrified of sitting with myself for like 2 minutes because I was just so afraid of, I'm going to be with my thoughts and I really don't like what's in there. And once things, I've had a very just like but insecure upbringing, basically. So like I thrived in the chaos. So when things calmed down, I didn't really know what to do.
When things got quiet, that's when shit got real.
Oh yeah. Because then you actually have to look at other things that are not outside yourself.
Yeah. Most people find their way into habits to distract themselves from feeling the feels. And you both know this, but like even things like overindulging in food or substance or escapism through video games, television, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Relationships.
Once you get quiet, there it is, right? You become your own sacred mirror. You sit with your thoughts. You're like, okay, that's fucked up. So in that process, were you starting to get uncomfortable to where you made a move to, maybe double down on yourself, double down on these ideas of the move to, I think it was Ecuador. Like what was the turning point to kind of break out of that uncomfortable space?
So it's one of these things that in hindsight just had to align exactly that way.
Yep.
And that teacher training that I chose, I didn't really know too much about yoga. I'd done a little bit of it. Both my mom and my sister are yoga instructors. So I was surrounded by it, but didn't have a practice myself. And initially it was just this, okay, I'm going to do this for a month. This is going to be a really good detox, because I'd spent a month in Colombia and I was like, that was not healthy. And
in what way? Can you elaborate? Was there, were you partying?
You mentioned the substances.
Yeah, I was partying way more back then. So I was trying to drown a lot of my feelings in alcohol. And in South America, drugs are very cheap. And when you're a woman, it's basically, how you get, how people buy you shots in the US. Like in Colombia, it's just, here, have some Coke.
Yeah.
Like that is kind of what happened for like maybe 4 or 5 months as I was just traveling. And when you're in hostels, like people always want to go out and party. And so you attach yourself to, because otherwise you don't fit in, and that's what everyone does. So or
there's a tribalism to it. You don't want to be left out. You don't want to be the sore thumb, so to speak. I mean, you kind of, and that's what happens to some people, is you want to be in this group to where you start adhering to some of the rituals, so to speak, whether it's, doing a little Coke here and there, getting drunk every night, whether it's staying up 24 hours in a day and crushing your circadian rhythm. Like there's a lot of negative aspects to that quality of life.
And that's what most people do. Like I didn't really, less for maybe a handful of people, like everyone was just drinking all the time. Like everyone was partying, and not just, oh, let's go out on a Friday night, but you go out every night.
Hard. Yeah.
and hard. And it's so cheap, you get a beer for like $1 and you just get, it's, depending on where you go, but South America, especially, it is relatively cheap to travel.
Yep.
So I knew it wasn't sustainable, and I was actually begging, because for some reason I never had hangovers, and I was begging for my body to be like, no, can you please just be fucked up so I have an excuse not to continue doing this? Because I would.
What would you attribute that to? Because I mean, that's, I know that there's actually a gene that like 5% of people possess. I actually heard about this recently on a Kill Tony episode about Shane Gillis, who's a comedian. And
he's a savage.
He has a gene. Potentially he has a gene. I think it was Huberman was talking about this on Rogan. He said that Shane Gillis, because they did this thing on Rogan's podcast where they got Ari Shaffir, like blackout drunk, and like Ari almost died, pretty much like liver failure, and like Shane Gillis was on Kill Tony the same night, like completely fine, and he had like over 30 beers like collectively. So do you think that you have that gene? Do you have the I don't get like fucked up gene?
You have the Shane Gillis gene.
I have the Shane Gillis gene. That's what it's called now.
Got it. Okay.
I don't think I do, and I had no idea what was going on, because when I was still in Austria, I was a bartender for 8 years. I would start towards the end, or earlier 20s, I would drink a little bit and then just have a 2-day hangover.
Wow. Yeah.
And so it was weird when I started traveling. Maybe it was because I actually felt not the emotional like stress and tension on me, where I wasn't feeling that as much. But I remember I was just in some hostel in Guatemala, and I think I had been up for like 48 hours, and I was like, I can't keep doing this, but my body is just fine and running perfectly on 3 hours of sleep. And I would still go to the museum, and I would still like do a volcano hike. Like I did this 15,000 foot volcano hike at 4 o'clock in the morning after like 3 days of partying, like no sleep. I was like, I don't know how that worked out.
Cocaine.
Yeah.
It was
essentially
a
drug.
I was fueled on altitude sickness and cocaine, and just
So did you kind of like have a come to Jesus moment, so to speak, where that all ended, or was that still like you went over to Costa Rica and then maybe that was your come to Jesus? Like, how did that transpire?
So it was interesting, because there were like 2 really major events. Like the first one was that yoga teacher training, where it was beautiful. It was in the Andes, just super secluded retreat center. I was there for a month, and it was this full on detox. And I spent so much time with myself, and I was so uncomfortable. I was just looking at all of these habits that I hadn't had kind of worked through throughout those months of traveling as well, where I was just disassociating and like numbing myself. And then I had this moment of quieting down and being like, oh, fuck, like this is not great. And so that practice and kind of that month of the actual practice of yoga really helped me. But we also worked with a Ecuadorian shaman family for that entire month. So they would come every week, and we did sweat lodges, and we did happy ceremonies and Reiki and the San Pedro ceremony. So we did all of that. And that was my introduction into plant medicine, really. That was, and I'm so grateful that I had that, because a lot of people, I think, get to it from a completely different point. And I got into it from, okay, yes, I was doing all of these other drugs without any intention or awareness, but now I'm getting to San Pedro, I'm getting to the tobacco, and being introduced to that with so much reverence and just so much respect and so much authenticity over the course of a month. And that really, there was something that I came back from that retreat and I was a different person. I did not drink anymore. I got up at 6 o'clock every morning. I was still at hostels all over the place, and I was just doing my yoga practice. I would go to the studio at 7 o'clock in the morning. I was in bed by 10, and I was just really taking care of myself and just felt so much better, and still not really knowing fully what do I want to do. But I was like, okay, now there's more purpose, and now there's this. And I actually really loved teaching yoga, which I didn't expect. But that practice, it's just one of these things that I went to it not knowing a lot about it, not expecting anything of it. And it's just the perfect fit.
That's beautiful.
And it tickles my brain in all the right ways, because I like to do a million things at the same time. And because yoga is so ever evolving and you can do so many different things, and you never stop learning, and you can never know everything.
Yep.
I was like, oh, this is actually stimulating enough for me where I can change it so much, and I will do this in 70 years and it still won't be boring for me. And it's held true. And it's been 5 years of a daily practice. I think it's pretty much
the big part that you're saying, that it's become a daily practice from these tools that you started picking up that were soul changing. And you have things from movements with guided breath to plant medicine to, like tobacco based things. And there's so many beautiful tools out there. And what I tell people all the time, because people have like a lot of questions, well, what do I start with? Or, a lot of times it has to do with, how you're introduced to it and who introduces you to it. And then it has to do with what's calling to your soul, right? Because there's 1,000 different implements, there's 1,000 different tools. Someone might not be able to start with ayahuasca, but they might be able to start with ecstatic dance. They might be able to start with breath work. They might be able to start with, journaling, grounding, getting in the sun. Like these are daily practices that become a part of your life. And it really does get you to a place where you can get, again, grounded, and you can get clear. And then you start to become powerful. You start to be able to like manifest. And it's really wild to see that journey. And so I want to jump back to David, because I want to kind of hear a little bit about your trajectory, kind of getting to, and it may have been Costa Rica that set everything off for you, but how did you kind of get to that point on that path?
Yeah, great question. And I love what you said about like, A, the importance of how you're introduced to it, and B, it's really just a matter of getting grounded and getting comfortable with yourself. And there are a million different ways to do it. But for me, like the whole spiritual path started probably freshman year of high school when we read this book, Siddhartha. Have you ever read that?
I've heard of it. I've never read it. Yeah.
Okay. Dude, you could read it in like an hour. It's like super small. But that kind of was my first introduction to any sort of like Eastern thought. So it's basically about the origin of Buddhism. And reading that in high school, for whatever reason, I never fully just jived with like the way that society felt to me. Like I always kind of felt like an outsider. Just looking at everything, it felt like it's just like none of it was for me. So here was something that I didn't know if that was for me, but it was some alternative to the way of life. I remember being like 15 years old and like wanting to like throw away all my technology and like live in the woods like Siddhartha does.
You felt the call pretty early on.
Yeah. So I knew that something was there, but it took a long time for that to mature. It mostly just led to me being kind of depressed for like a while, because I just nothing. I knew there was something more and I didn't know what that was. And I knew something was missing, and I had no idea how to find it. And so in grad school, I was getting really into neuroscience just from sheer interest in it. And are you familiar with Sam Harris at all?
I am. Yeah. And
Okay.
are you getting into like neurofeedback and NLP and all the different types of things?
I was reading just anything that I could about this stuff. And I was the biggest Sam Harris fanboy. Like I was obsessed with his podcast. I was like a staunch atheist back then.
Oh yeah.
And
I think we all were before plant medicine.
Yes. Yeah.
And breath work and all the other things.
My girlfriend in college was like super Christian and I was super atheist. And by the time we broke up, like that completely flipped. And the reason for that is I was reading and listening to Sam Harris and he talks all about LSD and my buddy had some and I was like, okay, it's time. We need to try this. And I mean, I can give you some details if you want. But
go for it. Yeah. Whatever you feel called to share.
Dude, I ate like 3 tabs and then like 40 minutes go by and I'm like, man, I don't feel anything. Let's go get some more.
The cardinal sin.
I know, bro. So I literally drove to my buddy's house, took some more and then drove back home. So I ended up taking about 5 tabs total and tripped solidly for 13 hours, which was harrowing.
That's
to say
really
the
rough.
Dude, like 8 hours into it, I was telling myself like, David, you took a drug. It's going to wear off. You're going to be okay.
Yep.
And then about 11 hours into it, I came to terms with the fact that this was my life now.
You're going to be this way forever.
I was thinking to myself, like, it's going to be really hard to treat patients because when I close my eyes, everything is made of fractals, but we're going to figure it out. I'll get through this.
Wow. Well, at least you were like giving yourself some sort of peace of mind in a very daunting situation.
Yeah. But that was my first introduction also to like the power really of meditation and breath because I dabbled with it before.
Yep.
But as I was sitting there, if I closed my eyes and just like didn't like try to be okay, like if I just closed my eyes and let my thoughts come in, I was immediately in like the worst hellscape possible of just like walls closing in around me, all of this anxiety about my relationship that I was in, because clearly it wasn't meant to work. And then if I could close my eyes and actually take a deep breath, that hellscape just transformed to like the most transcendent bliss I had ever experienced.
Wow.
But at that point, I didn't have much of a meditation practice. So I couldn't keep that going for more than like 2 breaths. But it was my first taste of that. Right. And so
it's a wild journey, brother. That for some context from people that have not worked with LSD, whether recreational or with, in ceremony. What's a general first time user of like just, someone who doesn't want to go maybe pull back the curtain of the cosmos, but maybe someone wants to get some feels and some, what do you think? Like a tab or 2? How many
like 2 tabs tops. Like if you're an adventurous person, not 5. Yeah. Don't do what I did, kids. It was a huge mistake. Although like at the same time, I'm a firm believer, like everything works out exactly the way that it's meant to.
No question.
So I, in a way, just kind of like dove off the deep end at the very first. So I didn't really have fear of it going forward. I had a lot of respect for it.
Yes.
But I knew that it wasn't anything to fear. And like I said, it really showed me like, everything that unfolds is going to be a reflection of how well can you hold yourself and how well can you sit with yourself.
Yep.
And so that day made me be like, fuck, I need to learn how to meditate. Because if I ever do acid again, like it's like a cheat code to having a good time. If you can actually like meditate and breathe,
you can actually become like the creator in a lot of ways. Like I've learned to like manifest shit almost instantly and like have a wild fucking journey on different psychedelics. It's crazy versus just letting it take you on a ride. You can kind of take it on a ride, which is great.
Totally. The manifesting, maybe that's something we can get into some more. Cause we have kind of our own practice with that. So maybe that's something we can discuss.
Let's do it. Yeah. It's beautiful.
But yeah, so after that day, I wasn't an atheist anymore. I don't think you can do 5 tabs of acid and be an atheist.
You're gonna believe,
yeah. And so I was curious about it. I kept experimenting with LSD. I experimented with mushrooms a little bit, and I'd always been curious about ayahuasca because to me that was almost just like, yeah, this is the next step. You do some acid, you do some mushrooms. Let's go try ayahuasca.
Do you recall like when you first started hearing the grumblings of it? Like what was it? Someone speaking about it? Was it a podcast? Was it a friend? Like where did you actually start hearing the term ayahuasca?
I actually think it was Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia.
Okay.
So are you familiar with that at all? That show?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So I'm like, I was a chemistry major once upon a time in college. So Hamilton's like my favorite dude on earth because I just really vibe with his nerdiness and also his interest in like all of the entheogens.
Oh yeah.
But again, at that point, I didn't have the spiritual aspect of it. It was still it was still like probing the depths of my mind from like a neuroscience point of view. Okay. And I was starting to warm up to the idea of maybe there is some more shit going on out there that I don't know, but I had no relationship to God or to spirit at that point in my life. So one of the, actually really the impetus for doing like pulling the trigger to go do ayahuasca, it was,
I love how she's laughing. For those that are just listening,
she knows the
over
story.
There laughing her ass off right now.
Oh yeah, I know this story. It's a great story.
Well, so like I mentioned, right? Like I worked in a PT clinic, and there's one story I can share if we back up for a moment about this, actually, just going back to like knowing that there was something else out there.
Yep.
So I went to school, University of Delaware. Delaware is like the worst place on earth to live, but it has the #1 PT school in the world, basically.
And they have a crazy tax exemption. I was a financial planner, tax exemption for businesses that want to like pocket some money, essentially.
Yeah. So like every corporation on earth is incorporated in Delaware.
Or they should be if they're not, right?
Yeah. So I'm living there. I go to school. I get a job. I'm living in Southern Delaware, which like if Delaware could get even worse, it's Southern Delaware. Oof. And I am working pretty much 11-hour days, and our clinic is on the beach. Like you can see the ocean from the clinic, which sounds great, except for when you're inside for 11 hours with no break.
Becomes wallpaper.
Yes. And everyone's coming in off the boardwalk being like, wow, it must be amazing to work here. I'm like, I fucking hate it here so much. Don't tell me that.
Damn.
And so I'm working this job that like, it's kind of soul sucking. And I don't mean to divert into like the PT profession, but most PTs hate their jobs because we have to do all this stuff that we don't believe in, but it's what insurance companies pay for. Right. So I'm spending 11 hours a day selling my soul and my morals for a paycheck. And I go to get groceries after work one day, and I'm driving home from getting groceries, planning my night. And I'm like, all right, I have just enough time to cook dinner, put all my groceries away, take a shower, go to sleep so that I can wake up, train jujitsu before work. And then I'll have just enough time to like meal prep so I can go to work, go to the gym, and go straight to sleep. And I'm thinking, I like have this vision of me doing this for 40 years. And I'm like, wow, I could just turn the steering wheel like 2 inches and this all ends right now. It was like the only way I can describe it is like an existential panic attack of like, fuck, I can't do this. And so the pandemic was actually, yes, thank you, man. Me too. The pandemic was a gift to me because our clinic shut down, and I was like, oh, I don't have to do this. And so I quit my job there. I started my own business doing remote personal training essentially for jiu-jitsu athletes. Okay. And I moved back home with my parents, and it was great for a lot of reasons, but I also kind of felt like a loser for moving back in with my parents.
Because society, especially the US, will tell you that. You go around the world, there's some cultures where the people never leave the house, you know, and and I grew up Italian, and my dad was the last one out of the house, and he actually he took care of my grandmother, and that's a lot of times that'll happen in certain cultures where like if there's the eldest of a boy or girl, they have to take care of one of the parents. They never leave the house. So I mean, it's only taboo because we've been told it is.
Totally. And now I've come to share that perspective for sure. But I mean, I went from making a pretty good salary to starting my own business. So I'm essentially making nothing.
Yep. Humble pie.
Yeah. And living at home, starting over. So I wasn't in a great place mentally. And clearly I wasn't in a great place mentally before because I was considering fucking killing myself instead of working for 40 years. Right. So we weren't starting in a great place. So I knew basically that like any success that I was going to have in business needed to start from within my own self and within my own mind. That's a huge lesson I've learned right now is like business is just a reflection of like your inner mental world. Beautiful. 100%. Yeah. And I knew that something needed to change if I was ever going to be successful. And I had a lot of dreams of like what I wanted to accomplish. But then I looked at what I was actually doing every day, and it was not taking steps to get there at all. And so I matched with someone on Tinder who started telling me about ayahuasca retreats.
Of all places, huh?
I know, dude. Our relationship was born from Tinder because someone told me to go do ayahuasca on Tinder.
Talk about serendipity in the strangest ways, man.
But this was actually one of the intentions I went into ayahuasca with, which we'll get to, was changing my dynamics in romantic relationships.
Beautiful.
Because when I was in Delaware, I was kind of a player. Like I had a lot of money, I had a nice place, and I went through a frat bro phase in college, and I was still kind of working my way out of some of that. So I didn't have the most ethical practices, we can say, around.
You were on the hamster wheel, right?
Women.
You were just kind of running through the motions, doing what you saw happen. But again, you knew pretty at a core level, even if it was subconsciously, that it just wasn't for you. And you were sad, you were depressed, you were missing out on life. You felt like you said, turn the wheel 2 inches. That's I was talking to my girlfriend the other night about this, where people that have survived jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge, and it's about 10% of them. They always come back and talk about how as soon as their hands left that railing and they leaped over, they had instant regret and wish they didn't do it. So you have these tales from the beyond, so to speak, of like someone who should be dead saying, don't do it. Easier said than done when people are in that place. But at the end of the day, it's like, we probably all know collectively between the three of us, with the journeys we've been on individually, how precious and beautiful and how grateful we should be with every fucking moment, even if it's the hard shit. I held my daughter till she died. Like I've done some crazy shit. Like those things have brought us to this moment. And without those things, we would never have this experience in life. So it's a beautiful share, brother. And I just want to commend your vulnerability.
Oh, thank you, man. And that you as well. That sounds fucking crazy what you've been through. But
wild. Yeah.
It's easier to have that perspective when you've gone through it all, and when you've experienced plant medicine, and when you've seen the beauty of life.
Yep.
And it's easy for us to say that. And I think that is the secret of like why plant medicine is so powerful, because I can tell someone that, but until they've had that experience, it doesn't sink into the same level.
They won't understand. Yep.
And I know that from my own life. Like I can be told something 1,000 times, but until I've made the mistake and paid the price for it, I don't learn that lesson.
You don't feel it.
Maybe. Yeah. So I'm at home. I'm feeling like a loser. I'm knowing that where I'm going is not where I want to be going. Right. And so I hear about that they're doing these ayahuasca retreats in Costa Rica. I am taking, it was at that point, I guess it was my second trip ever to leave the US. My jiu-jitsu academy they do every year a jiu-jitsu camp in Costa Rica. So it's like a jiu-jitsu vacation, basically.
Wow. That's fun.
And I was signed. It was super fun. So I signed up for that just because I wanted to travel. And I was like, all right, here's an opportunity for it. And then I'm thinking,
what year was this?
This was, when did we meet? It was 2021.
Okay. So still pandemic time, traveling for some people,
Yep.
Yeah, got it.
So I'm like, okay, I'm going to be in Costa Rica. Let's look around, do some research, see if I can find a center there. And so I find a couple. I'm doing some background research on them. And I realized that Soltara, which is where we met, Soltara has a retreat that starts on the last day of my jiu-jitsu camp. So I'm like, cool, I can go from the camp to this retreat, get it all in. I literally spent my entire life savings on this trip.
Good for you.
Yeah, because thank you. I was like, it's not doing me any good sitting in a bank. Like I don't make money just to hold on to money. We make money to live a life, right? So
have experiences. Yeah.
Fuck yeah. So I went all in on this trip. And the last time I had done LSD was a really challenging experience. It was actually the first time that I contemplated suicide as like a real thing that could happen.
Can you elaborate to some of the detail of what it was?
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So looking back on it, I had no business doing acid that day. It was one of those things where like, I'm in a terrible state of mind with work, right?
Setting.
Exactly. I have all this work hanging over my head. I got to finish before Monday, but like it's Saturday and my buddy's driving over here. The guy who gave me 5 tabs of acid the first time. So
irresponsible medicine man.
For real. He and I are like brothers though, because we've been through this stuff together, And so, yeah, bad setting. I was living with a roommate that like, I did not like him. I didn't like his girlfriend. He was out of town. I thought the girlfriend was going to be gone. Turns out the last minute that like she was still going to be around that weekend. Yeah. Super awkward. She's best friends with like a state trooper who's over all the time. And she's like, not cool.
Shit.
We were so fucking paranoid, dude. So fucking paranoid. I was like, Brian, we got to be quiet. If she hears anything, she will call the cops. You shouldn't be doing acid if you're thinking that.
No.
So we're upstairs in my bedroom tripping, and she's downstairs like watching the fucking Bachelor. And it was
when you
not
say
a good day.
it was you and Cordy at this time?
No, I'm sorry. Me and my buddy Ryan who gave me all this
Okay.
stuff. Yep. Yep. Hadn't met Cordy at this point.
Got it.
So yeah, I mean, it was just not a fucking good acid trip. I was just writhing on my bed for like 8 hours, just the worst anxiety ever. And I go to the bathroom, and anyone who tells you not to look in the mirror when you're on psychedelics is just scared of like what they're going to see. So I like to look in the mirror because I think it's important to see that.
Right.
And I'm like washing my hands, and I look over and my razor is there, and I shave with like the old school razor with like the disposable blades. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I think also because I was washing my hands, so I'm looking in the sink and I'm like, it would be so easy. It would be like nothing to take one of those razor blades and just run it across your wrist and see all the blood pouring into the sink.
Mm-hmm.
And if the only way I can describe it is like, if you've ever been on a bridge and you just think to yourself, like, damn, I could throw my phone into the water right now and like nothing in the world would change. I don't know if you've ever felt that way.
Thought too, right? Like, because you felt that insignificant in that moment, like no one would care. Who's gonna give a shit?
Totally. I was thinking to myself, like, literally nothing on earth would change except for I wouldn't have to go to work the next day. Yeah.
Wow.
That's pretty fucked up now.
So
that I say it out loud.
And we all know that's not, I mean, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be doing the work you're doing with Cordy, sharing the journey, all the things that you're doing,
Oh yeah. So, I mean, clearly I didn't, but it was the first time that suicide went from this abstract thing to like, holy shit, that would be so easy for me to do that right now.
Yep.
So that was the last time I'd done any psychedelics. And then here I am signing up for this ayahuasca retreat. Right. And so I have some hesitancy about it.
For sure. Understandable.
Yeah. And the only way I can describe is like, if you know how people will like say like, man, I need to get in shape, and they sign up for like a marathon because it forces them. It's like, you're either going to get in shape or you're going to have a really fucking bad time. So to me, I said, all right, I'm going to spend thousands of dollars on this ayahuasca retreat. It's 3 or 4 months from now. I've got that much time to get my shit together. So I need to start reading, journaling, meditating.
Put your back against the wall. Yeah,
exactly. It's like, I need to start doing all these practices again, or else I might fucking kill myself in Costa Rica. And we don't want to do that. Right. So like, I gave myself a deadline to kind of start getting my shit together.
Good for you.
That was a super long-winded answer, but I think the question was, how did I come to do ayahuasca in Costa Rica? So
that was perfect. I mean, it's important to hear that because there's so many people that have the same feelings, or to a degree, they're feeling something similar. And whether it's on the side of meditation, breath work, all the way to plant medicine and in between, that's calling to them to learn about, or whether it's they're having anxiety, PTSD, trauma, they're having depression, they're having thoughts of suicide. It's what you're doing by sharing your story, your testament, so to speak, is who knows? There could be one person listening to this or watching this today, 20 years down the road. And because they heard of what you're talking about, you saved their life and you've done your job. So it's important to share the context, and it's vulnerability. I've found in my storytelling of my journey, it's absolutely courage in action. And so to be able to speak about these things, it's healing for yourself. And then it also gives other people that may be thinking about having those conversations. It kind of almost gives them like a role model, or like a somewhat of a permission in a way, not that they need it, but like they're like, oh, maybe I'll do the same thing. And then they have a conversation that maybe saves their lives or someone else's. So thank you.
Totally. Yeah. Well, hey man, I appreciate you asking the questions, and this whole experience is kind of interesting for me because I have my own podcast. I'm usually in your position asking the questions. And I think part of that is because I don't love talking about myself. So I'm always the guy who's quiet, and I'll ask you a million questions.
You're a great listener.
I won't open up. Yeah, I'm a great listener. I'm bad talking about myself, but thank you, man, for bringing this out. Because you're right.
It's my honor. So you get to Costa Rica, you put your back against the wall, life savings as the deposit. You start getting into these practices that are probably beyond your scope of understanding at that point, to where you're a sharp guy. I'm not saying that, but basically what you're putting in these tools and these frames of reference to be able to navigate this journey. But then also you're actually having these are the tools that are what help you remain grounded, from the journaling, the meditation, the breath work. You hear about people that go on psychedelic journeys and they just do the plant medicine. They don't integrate, they don't embody, they don't do any of the pre stuff. They all this stuff that's the real work, right? Because it's hard to go do a psychedelic journey, especially if it's hard, if you're purging, if you're going through a traumatic state, if you get stuck in a loop, whatever. But the real work is before and after. It's like the 90%. And so
Totally.
let's speak to that a little bit. Let's speak a little bit to either one of your journeys in Costa Rica, maybe the meeting in Costa Rica. Like, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up the like integration and preparation piece, because I agree that's like 80% of the puzzle. I even went as far as hiring a coach that works with business owners to get the most out of their plant medicine experience.
That's beautiful.
Looking back on it, like, I don't know, it's one of those things, like in hindsight, I don't know how much I would have gotten without him. I feel like I paid him a lot of money to not get too much, but
but
either way,
the intention got started there.
Exactly. I wanted to go into it with reverence and with preparation. And he did definitely help me get clear on what I needed to do. So he helped me with the intention setting.
Beautiful. And
I alluded to this before. One of those big intentions was changing my behavior in romantic relationships, because what I said I wanted was one thing. And then when you look at my behavior, what I clearly actually wanted, or what I was pursuing, was something completely different. So I always had this vision of having, a life partner, having someone to build things with. At that point, I was starting to come around on the idea of having children. Used to be atheist and want 0 children. Now I chant the Hare Krishna mantra every day, and we are talking about having like 7 kids.
Heck yes.
So
7, that's a great number. Get to work.
But yeah, so soon, dude.
Yeah.
But yeah, so one of the biggest things, I think, and this is talking about like how ayahuasca completely revolutionized my life, was I started reading this book, the Bhagavad-Gita. So
beautiful. Yep.
Who's actually one of my clients from my business, he's become my best friend now. He was telling me about this book, and he's telling me I got to read it. And I'd heard Duncan Trussell talk about it a lot. Duncan. So I love Duncan so much, dude.
He's so funny.
But so I was thinking to myself, like, man, I already know about it. I've heard all about it. Like, I don't need to read it. And he was like, dude, trust me, read this book. It'll change your life. And so I'm reading this book, and literally as I'm getting on the plane to go to Costa Rica, I'm reading a chapter that's talking about withdrawing your mind from your senses. And it's like, don't focus on everything that looks good. Don't focus on these tastes, these smells, these sights. You have to turn all of your attention towards God. I literally read that, and then I look across the aisle, and I'm like, damn, that's a hot girl sitting over there. So had some work to do still.
Right.
I'm wondering how much details I should share about this.
I mean, I know all of them.
Cordy does know all of them. So this is the week before ayahuasca. I proceed to hook up with that girl and have sex with another girl at the jiu-jitsu camp. The week before.
2 separate girls in that week?
2 separate girls. So that should tell you something
for
about
those
where
listening,
I was at.
For those listening, maybe that haven't done an ayahuasca journey before, there's this thing called a dieta. And you're generally supposed to, about 2 weeks out, really cut off all the quote unquote sins of the flesh, from food to alcohol to sex to disturbing images to there's so much that goes in it. Setting your intention, which you should do a long time before that, but at least 2 weeks out. And you're going in hooking up.
I was also drunk and high when I did that, which you're also not supposed to do. So
wow.
I don't get the wrong idea that I was like perfect going into this retreat. No, I wanted to be good.
There's no such thing as perfect. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So then I meet her. She picks me up at the ferry, and I'm like, for God's sake, David, stop staring at hot women. Like, you are not here to meet girls.
Did I miss a piece? So you had met somewhere along the lines where she picked you up?
No, she was working for the retreat center.
I worked at Soltara.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So she was the person picking everyone up, like from the airport, and I came separate. So so many places to go. But yeah, so I'm reading this book, the Bhagavad-Gita, and I really want to experience these things. I'm reading about what a true yogi is like, who lives every moment basically in meditation, every moment with this awareness of the breath and the awareness of God.
Wow.
And I'm thinking to myself, like, that sounds great. I would love to be like that. And yet here I am still behaving completely in a different way.
Human. Yeah.
Yeah. And so she picked everyone up from the airport. Like I said, I was already in Costa Rica, so I came separately. I drove to a ferry. I took the ferry across, and then she picked me up. I guess you picked me up at the ferry station.
I picked you up at the ferry station.
So that was kind of a neat thing of like, she was already with everyone else, and then I was like the one person who was separate.
You're the special person. Yeah. Like the golden child.
Yeah. And yeah, so that was just a neat little experience. But like I said, she picks me up, and I'm like, of course, this fucking beautiful tattooed woman is coming to pick me up. I'm like super into that.
The universe throws you another test.
Exactly. I'm like, David, fucking stop looking at women. You're not here for that. Uh, yeah. So what was I talking about?
You're getting to
The Gita.
And actually really just meeting each other too. Yeah. Yeah. You were talking about the book, but then you're also talking about kind of getting to where you meet each other and kind of, potentially your journey with ayahuasca.
Yeah. So let me pause here. I've been talking for a while. I definitely want to talk about how the Bhagavad-Gita interplays with my ayahuasca experience, but maybe let's give Cordy a minute.
Yeah, Cordy, let me ask you, unless you want anything, if you want to add anything to that or share anything about that, but I just wanted to ask, how did you get into working for that center? How long had you been there? How did you get drawn to it? And like, had you had some unbelievable of your own journeys, either there or elsewhere?
Yeah. So it was, again, looking back, so interesting because I went to Soltara in the beginning of 2019 for the first time when they were very new. So they'd been up and running, I think, for like 4 or 5 months.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So very, very new. And it was funny. I was engaged at the time and my fiance was from the US. So we went through this entire K1, like the 90-day fiance visa. I don't know if you've ever watched that TLC show.
It's like off.
Yeah. So we did the whole 9 yards with just like going through this entire process, and I had to be outside of the US. So I just kept traveling basically.
Yep.
And one day he calls me up and he's like, yo, before you move to the US, do you want to go and do ayahuasca in Costa Rica? I was like, what? I was like, yeah, it's in like 3 weeks and like it's a Dennis McKenna retreat. I was like, who the fuck is Dennis McKenna? Like, I had no idea. I'd heard of ayahuasca because I was just in South America for so long before, but I'd not really felt drawn to it specifically. But I was like, yeah, like, fuck it. Let's go. I did the interview at the US Embassy in Vienna, and then I went to Costa Rica 3 days later.
Wow.
With my like visa for the US. And then I moved from that retreat, immigrated to the US. So it was this very interesting time in my life.
Pilgrimage, essentially, like just kind of this voyage. Yeah.
And it was almost, ayahuasca was the initiation to something really, really big. And I was a yoga teacher already at the time. So I was teaching all over the world. I'd been to India. I had done teacher trainings in Mexico. So I'd come a really long way. That was about 2.5 years from like that teacher training. So I'd done a lot of things in that time. And I had a lot more purpose. So I was like, okay, I want to really hold space for people. And I see the benefits of this practice. And I want to connect them to these medicines that they have within themselves, because it gave me such a peace of mind. And me going from severe ADHD and just like anxiety all the time and trying to plan every little thing to I am actually at peace with myself and I have tools to connect and to sit and to not just react all the time, but to go through life and make my own choices and not react from this is pain, like this is how I need to react. Like that was my whole just baseline and foundation has always been yoga, which is beautiful because it intertwines so well with plant medicine. And we've talked about this before, meditation, breath work, just the introspection, knowing, and you can, like you said, you can manipulate like in this space, like if I can breathe, if I know how to do it. And my maestros always says, you just need to focus. And it sounds so simple, but it's like, that's all it is. It's just so hard for us to do.
Yes.
And so I went to Soltara and I met Dennis McKenna, which he's a cool guy. He's still in our WhatsApp group. Like we still have a WhatsApp group chat going on, and he like chimes in every once in a while. Like he's a super cool guy. Like I love, we call him Uncle Dennis. He's awesome.
For those listening, let me just throw in a little bit of some value. So his older brother, Terrence, was one of the thought leaders around bringing psychedelics to the forefront and mainstream of culture. And before Ram Dass was Ram Dass, they worked together, and they were basically the forefathers, so to speak, of what psychedelics could do in a clinical setting, what it could do for healing all the different mental disorders, from PTSD to anxiety, depression, drug addiction, because a lot of those things root in the same place. They manifest into different things. And these are some of the reasons why we have what we have today. So I just didn't want that to go missed for those who are maybe new to this kind of conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's how powerful that is. You were talking to basically, one of the pillars of a movement that's changing the world today.
And it was so funny because I went into it and I had no idea who he was because I would have been absolutely starstruck. So I was just like, okay, cool. Like we're going to have some workshops, like we're going to just, do that. So I had no idea. And I also didn't do any research. I was just, okay, like here's a flight, like this retreat is booked and paid for. Was he
part of Soul Tower in any capacity? Did he help them get started?
No, so he is on the board as an advisor. And then he came down before the pandemic. He would come down every once in a while for special retreats.
Understood.
So it was, you still had the ceremonies, but then you also had workshops and talks with Dennis, and he would sit in ceremony.
Got it.
And just be around, which super cool. Like we got so much out of this. And I got there, and the first 2 nights, and I followed the dieta. I was really good with that. And the first 2 nights, nothing happened. And I just sat there and I got really frustrated.
When you sat with the medicine, nothing happened.
Nope.
2 cups, 3 cups?
So the first night they only gave us a little bit because it's the introductory dose. Yeah. So I had, I think, like 3/4 of a cup maybe, or maybe 1 cup. And nothing really happened. And I was also so jet lagged because I came from Europe and I came right to the ceremony basically. And there is the pre-ceremony yoga that they do. And I fell asleep during Shavasana, and I woke up with the Maloka being dark. Oh, wow. And the maestros are in the middle, and the facilitator comes and he's like, Cordy. And I was like, what's going on? And like, I was on the far end of the circle where they go around and everyone drinks. And I was, I think, the third to last to drink. So I'd been out for a while.
It's a good nap.
It was a super good nap. and I was so confused. And I stumble into the center, and I had no idea what other people were doing because it was just out. So I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if you said anything. And so I made my way through that, and nothing really happened. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Let's just try again the next night. And went in the next night, had a little more, and I didn't fall asleep. I was just it was just black the entire time, and there was no sound. And it was interesting because the Maloka was insane. Like people were going through like exorcism like experiences basically. We had a veteran there who basically like they start him off with a cup like this, so like not a shot glass but like
big old cup,
like a big old cup, because he'd been there before. And he's like, I will need like 4 refills before I do anything, so I'm just gonna get started with. So we had some like people there who had some really big experiences, and I didn't notice any of that and didn't feel anything. So the third night I was like, maybe this is not for me. And everyone was sharing these beautiful experiences and life-changing realizations and so much healing. And I'm just sitting there being like, well, maybe I'm just different. Maybe, like maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe, like how cool, like how amazing can this really be? And then the third night, I had 3 cups. So I had to go back a couple of times. And what I actually found out as I continued doing a lot more in the last couple of years is that my tolerance is very high. So I will basically have to drink 2 cups to have any effect for the most part.
That Shane Gillis gene, dude.
A little bit,
it
maybe.
Really is.
It's similar with psilocybin too. Like I have, as weirdly, because I'm a very small woman, I have weirdly high tolerance, which now makes sense because my maestros, I'm apprenticing in Peru, they're like, it's because you're supposed to be holding space for other people. That's why I have a really high, really high tolerance. Because I can fully function on like half a cup, 3/4 of a cup.
Yeah, you're tapped in, you're in the energetic space, you're in the field, but you're not overwhelmed the way you can't facilitate.
Exactly. Yeah. But I had no idea about that. And so that third ceremony, like all of a sudden it hit me like a train, and I went to this insanely beautiful and challenging experience where the WhatsApp group chat that we have is called the Screaming Maloka because of that night. And Dennis, after that, it was not just me, it was like another guy. And after that night, he was like, I'm not sitting the fourth night. That was so much. Like, I need a break. It was also really, really hot during that week, but he was like, nah, there was just so much energy. Like, I'm cool sitting out one. But I really had this full-on awakening experience in that ceremony. And the maestra who was there at Soltara, her name is Maestra Silvia. I connected with her in that ceremony so much because she just held me and supported me through that. And I was just weeping beforehand. She was having her hands on my head and just really working with me. And I was so, so grateful. And I didn't know what it was going to look like, but I was just, this is a teacher. Like, this is such an important, like, this is a guru. Like, Ram Dass finds Babaji, like, that's what it was for me. And I connected with her a little bit because I do speak Spanish. So I was able to talk to her outside of ceremony a little bit, and we connected on Facebook.
Nice.
And so after that retreat, like, very, very fast forward, I moved to the US. I did a bunch of certifications as a psychedelic assisted therapist in Colorado with a clinic. I started Stan Grof's legacy training, which is a 5-year program. So doing holotropic breathwork, all that stuff. And I got married, and then like a couple months later, the pandemic hit, and it did not work out amazingly. In hindsight, it's one of those things where, like, I know that I had to go through all of these experiences because I was able to grow so much from it. Yep. Basically working through, how do I leave an abusive relationship and actually choose myself? How do I set boundaries? How can I stop people pleasing? And because I was completely dependent too. I was in a different country. I didn't have a job because I had to like wait for the green card, and then the pandemic hit. So I was completely dependent, like financially and just in the way that I was living. And so there was so much medicine just in that experience. And I can talk about this now because I came out of it rather unscathed. Like, it was incredibly hard. But this is the thing too. Ayahuasca gave me so much faith and so much belief, where I was like, I know that there is a deeper meaning, a purpose to all of this. I know that there is more. And I started to understand through the trainings so much about the psychological depths of all of this, of we are, reacting from past pain, and just really seeing all of these things play out. And I was reading a lot of Ram Dass, I was reading Stan Grof, I was reading a lot of James Fadiman. So I had all of this amazing literature and these amazing teachers who gave me so much understanding and helped me to navigate that situation in the best way I could at the time. But I decided at the end of 2020, like, I pulled the trigger and I was like, okay, I just need to leave the situation. This is not serving me.
Of your marriage.
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
And kind of going from, okay, like, I have a house, I have a job, I built a community here for 3 years, to I'm just going to let go of all of that and dive off the deep end. Because again, it was this, like, the darkness and not knowing is still better than what I was finding myself in.
Oh yeah.
And I had talked to Melissa, who's the founder of Soltara, or co-founder, a couple of weeks before that, because I was like, well, I would love to just go back. I would love to go back and volunteer and just be there as a yoga teacher. And it worked out perfectly. I sent her a text, and she was saying, yeah, we're looking for someone for like starting January. What's your timeline like? And I was on an interview with her and the manager few days later, and I had my flights booked like a week later. So it was, it unfolded relatively fast. So I actually basically had this beautiful opportunity from leaving my marriage and not really knowing where to go to I can hold space for other people and I can continue doing this work that I love so much. And it was fascinating to go back there because I got out of the plane and I kind of landed and touched the Sultara, and it was like I'd never left. And I just loved that space. And I do very well with, I was in hospitality for such a long time, and I'm a very social
You're good with
person.
people. Yeah.
I'm good with people. And so I got there and just had this beautiful environment to really continue the work. And it was funny too, because like the first retreat I was working was Aubrey Marcus plus a ton of like the fit for service people. I was like, oh, cool. Like, because they were like, oh yeah, just so you know, this is what's happening. Like, don't get intimidated. And I was like, this is fine. And they're all wonderful people.
Of course.
So I had such an amazing time and made some really wonderful friends from that group as well.
That's beautiful.
But so it was cool because I was just really had the opportunity to work with this medicine so much more and work on myself. And I don't know if you've experienced that, but a lot of people that I've worked with since then, because I was already working as a psychedelic therapist not with ayahuasca specifically, but with cannabis and psilocybin.
Okay.
Because that's what I trained with. And so I knew this space, and you can see how people just have this just process of they find this medicine, and not all of them, but a lot of them, there's just something, there's this light bulb that goes off, and there's this rapid transformation where you're just put in the path, and within a year, you look at them and it's not even the same person in all the best ways.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what I love about that work. And looking back now too, because it's been like a year and a half since I was there, like a lot of the people that I continued following from doing this medicine and being in a container where it is like the setting is very safe and the facilitators are incredible and the medicine's beautiful and the maestros have so much integrity, and you can really see how the set and setting plays out and how much it supports people.
Oh yeah.
So it was just super cool to go back, honestly. Like because when I was there the first time and I had this incredible experience, I was like, yo, like this is goals, like to come back here and just like work, this would be goals. And then 2 years later, I randomly just manifested that and made that happen.
And you went back in January?
I went back in January.
And we met
March.
Wow.
And so to tie that in a little bit with David's story, I was working there and I was doing the yoga. I was a retreat assistant. So I was running a bunch of like the back end stuff as well, just helping with coordinating everything. And he was reading the Bhagavad-Gita and I was reading the Bhagavad-Gita randomly at the same time. And so we didn't actually talk at all.
I was avoiding you because I was not there to look at hot girls. I was telling myself, David, don't go out of your way to spend time with her.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Trying to be a good boy.
I was trying. Yeah, I was. I broke all the rules the last week. I was like, I can't be doing that again.
It was noticeable because especially the pre-ceremony yoga. So the yoga and meditation that you do right before ceremony.
I went the first day to check it out. And I was like, this isn't for me.
Yeah. And most people do. Like I had not worked a retreat there where people didn't come to the pre-ceremony yoga. Like very rarely people would choose not to do that because it's so helpful in that space. So I saw you like come to the first ceremony and then you just didn't. And I was like, what?
At least he was trying, you know?
I also like, this is actually an interesting thing about us, right? So like you told us this whole story of your path to be a yoga instructor and everything that yoga does for you. And I have never been a yoga person, right? Like I have got my own movement practice with jujitsu, with weightlifting. And so it's just never resonated with me. But I start getting into this book, the Bhagavad-Gita, which is really the basis of all yoga philosophy. And now I understand that yoga is so much more than the poses. The asana practice is like the poses and the stretching and everything. So I'm reading this book that's basically like the crux of yoga. And then I'm like skipping her yoga class because it's just not for me. But all of this like led to us being able to connect on this super deep level with this shared interest in what's called Bhakti Yoga. So it's like a specific path. And the term yoga really just means union with divinity or union with God. And all of the practices are just supposed to help you get there. And so Bhakti Yoga is all about loving devotional service of Krishna, of God. And really, the way that you do that, the way that you serve God the best is by serving other human beings the best. And so that idea really did become the basis of our whole relationship. The first time we talked is because I was sitting there reading the Gita and she came over and we talked about it. And I probably awkwardly left the conversation early because I was trying to like not talk to her.
Yeah, you did.
But then after I go home, I sent her this book from Ram Dass. It's called Paths to God. So it's Ram Dass's collected teachings on the Gita. And you probably thought I was like a serial killer because I texted her. I was like, "Hey, what's your address? Can I send you something?"
Gotta send.
But I knew that she needed this book. Like I knew that she would.
It was speaking to you to share it. Yeah,
totally. Yep. And that became the basis of us talking. It was like what, 6 months, 4 months, 6 months after the retreat.
I think 3 months.
Okay, I'm bad with calendars. 3 months. And yeah, that was kind of how our relationship blossomed. But yeah, that's
do you want to remains question. So do we want to try to fit in the business and the nonprofit, or do we want to do a part 2? Because I've done part 2 and 3 with people. So
I was going to ask, you got like what, 20 minutes till you got to go pick up your kids?
So I don't want to rush anything. So do we want to just kind of like pause it and then jump back into a second round, or do you got 20 minutes to talk about business and nonprofit?
Dude, I'm down for part 2 if you're
Let's
down
do part two. Yeah.
I'd love to maybe just talk a little bit about not necessarily the nonprofit, but just more the maestros that we now work with and kind of how that developed. So I told you, Maestra Sylvia, she's from the Shipibo lineage, all the healers that Soltara are, which I love. But beautiful. She was there, and I really connected with her. And I worked at Soltara for about 3 months, and then I went back to California because I was like, I need to get my divorce paperwork started.
Where in California?
San Francisco Bay Area.
San Fran, okay.
Yeah. So I used to live in San Francisco, and then I moved to Berkeley. Actually moved in with a friend who I met at Soltara the first go around. So I ended up living with her, which was awesome. But I went back to the US because I was like, well, let me try to be an adult about this. Let me, go through. And I had this tendency to just run from my problems. And usually this would literally be, oh, let me just go to a different continent. And I did that a number of times. So I was like, no, like I can't do it. Like, even though it was, a relationship that ended up being very toxic and very unsafe in a lot of ways, let me still go back and try to resolve this, with mediation and with just making sure that we both get the most out of this experience, like even though it didn't work out, which, over 50% of marriages don't. So,
right.
Something that just happens. And I do think that everyone is your teacher in
no question
incredible ways. So I was just really determined to let's just grow from this. Like, let's learn, let's grow, and let's part ways, just not being angry at each other. And
somewhat consciously uncouple.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And so I went back to do that, but I felt this calling to do more work with the medicine. And I just hit up my maestra and I texted her on Facebook, and I was like, yo, can I come down to Peru? She was like, yeah, come on down. Like, when do you want to come? And so I basically just booked this trip where it was just me. Wow. And like, they didn't have a center or anything. And I just wanted to diet with them, and I wanted to learn from her. And I just had this kind of how ayahuasca calls you to her. I had this calling to, I know this is my teacher. I know I need to learn from her, and I know I need to go to Peru.
Nice.
And so I went down, that was a little over a year ago, and I sat with her and her husband. And it's just, it's beautiful because have you worked with the Shipibo at all with that lineage?
So when I went down to Peru, I was down in Cusco in the Sacred Valley, and we were working with Queros, Quero. And I don't remember off the top of my head. It's either it might be Shipibo or another thing, but they were like wildly ingrained in what they were doing. I'll have to get back to you on that because I remember I used to know, and now I've forgotten. So I'll get back to you.
All good.
Fair enough.
But so I've only sat with Shipibo because even when I got back to Soltara, it was a different couple, but it was also Shipibo lineage, and they all know each other, which is because it's a very small community. Yeah. They all live around Pucallpa, Ucayali River, like valley sort of. So I went down and I just spent 3 weeks in isolation with them in the jungle, and it was life-changing.
So beautiful.
So many different ways because it was just me. There were no other people. And I was the first person to be on the land that they purchased, which is outside of Pucallpa in the jungle. And I got there, they were building this little maloka that fits maybe 4 people. And they were still building that. So the first couple of ceremonies we did in my bedroom, which was just this cabin that they had just they put the bed in as I arrived and everything. So basically what happened is during the pandemic, or kind of halfway through it, Maestra Sylvia and her husband, his name is Noe, decided that they didn't want to work for anyone else. Like they didn't want to go off to other retreats and be separated from each other for months and be separated from their 4 children, and just really work together because they've been together for over 20 years, have 4 kids, and they've been serving medicine for over 20 years as well together, which is
that's beautiful,
incredible. And just the way that they do that, because like all their ikiros, so the way they sing the songs to you, the way that they work with you, they're just this incredible team and this unit where this is union. Like this is the medicine bringing them together. These are healers. These are people that do this work just with so much love and with so much respect for the medicine. And just sitting with that, like outside of the ceremony, was so healing because I didn't have parents that were together and I never saw that. And just to see, oh, you can have a beautiful relationship. Oh, you can build something together. You can have children and include them into everything that they're doing. So just being held in this container of this very closely knit community and Shipibo family was maybe even more healing than the medicine itself.
Yep.
And so I was there, spent a couple of weeks with them, and I just got this inspiration of, because it's very different. Like Soltara is a beautiful center. It's very upscale. It has a lot of comforts, and it's for sure a really wonderful option for people, like especially for the first time, because it's not, the culture shock is not that hard. But then you go to Peru where there's no internet, like there's no flushing toilet in a lot of parts.
You're throwing
like
toilet paper in the trash barrel versus flushing it. In the,
yeah. And you're like, there's barely electricity. You don't have anything to distract you, and you're just outside, and but I love that. And the first couple of days from just being shut out from the outside world, I was so anxious because I was like, trying to look at my phone and thinking of ways to distract me. And then after a week or so, just really settling into this space of I'm just with the plants and I'm just with this medicine, and they grow everything. They're like ayahuasca grows. They're like all of the medicines for the dietas grow there, and they prepare it, and they just shared so much with me. And so it was just this really beautiful kind of me choosing her as a teacher, but then also them choosing me as an apprentice, which was such an honor. And I started, because I went there for my own healing, but then I continued. I was like, I need to bring people to you. Like I need to just show other people that this kind of experience exists as well, that there is, because it's still like, it's so interesting, even though, you know, they work at other centers, they still work very differently when the center is run and operated by someone else. And when they have, because there's no investors, there's no above company telling them what to do.
No competing agendas. It's just the way they want to do
nothing.
it. Yeah.
No shareholders to answer to.
Yeah.
And there's like a no bullshit kind of thing. It's like, this is what a medicine is, and this is what you're getting. Like, if I don't think you need a refill, then guess what? You don't get a refill because you need to go sit down and focus. And there's a lot of humility in that, because
for sure.
Like, I was like, you know, just to be told no when I go and like pay someone, it's like, excuse me, what now? And so it was just this very, very different experience that gave me so much. And I really think, especially with ayahuasca specifically, because Jesse, you've done it, you know how powerful it is. You need to have people that have trained with this for such a long time. You like, this is not I'm doing ayahuasca 3 times and then I'm going to go and serve people. The way that they understand the medicine, the way they understand the icaros, the way that they like work with your energy, it's this energetic surgery. You need, like, it's decades of training, it's years of dieting, and you need that. And just really seeing that this is the only way this really should be served is, yes, have facilitators and people who like help hold space, but to really get the most out of this medicine and to get, because too, like, energetically, there's so much manipulation and that can happen if people don't know how to work with it, because it is so powerful. You can't have people who don't know what the fuck they're doing or who have bad intentions give you. That's
the other side of it. Yeah. The other side of it is like people that don't like have your the best for you at heart. And there's a lot of people out there that can really, really put you in a bad place. And I think that's something we can dive into a little bit deeper next time. But even for me, my own personal experience, you know, working with, you know, I've worked with a bunch of plant medicines and different kinds and different types and different reasons. And I would be the first to tell you that I would not ever even dream of facilitating an ayahuasca journey.
God, no.
And I've facilitated multiple, you know, psilocybin journeys for other people, and it's been beautiful. And that does not give you even, you know, a step towards the front door of being able to do ayahuasca. It's not even close. And I'll be that's not even something that really even calls to me. I don't think that'll ever be on my path. But for those that think they can go do ayahuasca once or twice and then try to hold space and like do everything they need to do in ceremony, don't.
Don't.
Just don't do it.
Just don't. That's good advice. Just don't.
Just don't even do it.
And this is actually something that facilitators that I've met and that I value very highly and respect very dearly, none of them are ever like, oh, it's my place to serve this. They're like, I'm helping facilitate them. Like, I'm not touching the medicine. The maestros are doing everything.
And they know the power of the medicine, and they respect it is the big reason. And it's instead of thinking, oh, I'm a badass, I'm some spiritual guru. Someone tells you that they're a guru, walk
Run.
away. Yeah.
Or they call themselves a shaman.
So
that's
I get it. I understand it for like marketing purposes for some people, like they have experience, but you know, when you're in the presence of someone who's at that level, they don't have to say a word. They're just, they just are. They're just, they're just that person. So I'd love to continue in part 2 and talk more about your teachers, because what I'm picking up from it is they're becoming role models for both of you, and maybe you both doing work together. And I want to hear all about that. And I want to hear about the calling to be able to share this with the world. I want to talk about the nonprofit and whatever else ekes out. I don't want to rush anything. So if y'all are great with it, between both of you, we can just pause here and we'll jump to part 2 as soon as we can.
Hell yeah, man. I think it's a great place to stop. And I'm super excited for part 2 because there's still so much good stuff to dive into.
We'll run it back. We'll do another, 90 minutes. We'll, where you may be a part 3. I've had a few people come on 3 times. So you may be the first part 4. I don't know. So
part 4 down here in Mexico, man.
We're in Peru.
I'm in. I'm in.
All right, let's do it.
But thank you both so much for being you. I want to be the first listener, first viewer to say how much it's important to hear your story, because there are people out there that are being called, especially in this time, day and age with what's going on in the world. The reason why it's so dark, quote unquote, is because the light is needed so much. And I believe you both are doing your job to bring that light to the world. So I want to be the first to say thank you both so much. Sending you both a ton of love, and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you,
Jesse.
That's beautiful.
My pleasure.